Iron Man becomes Doctor Doom. In one of the wildest what-if stories Marvel has ever told, we witness a complete role reversal between two of its most brilliant and egotistical minds, Tony Stark and Victor Von Doom. Doom steals Stark's life, and Stark is forced to rise from ruin under a new identity, Doctor Doom. So set in a reality where Tony and Victor are college roommates, the story begins as you'd expect. Stark is the cocky, charming playboy genius, while Doom is the cold, focused intellectual with a superiority complex. At first, there's tension, but Doom, ever the opportunist, begins to recognize Stark's potential and hatches a plan to exploit it. Doom reveals to Tony a secret project, a machine that could unlock telekinetic potential in the human brain. He claims it's for the good of mankind. Stark, skeptical but intrigued, agrees to help. The two work together, their egos clashing, but progress advancing. And when the machine is finally ready, Tony volunteers to be the test subject. And that's when the truth hits. Doom never intended to grant telekinetic powers, he built a device to switch minds. As Stark is trapped in, Doom presses the button and steals Tony Stark's body, memories and future. The world believes the man standing before them is still Tony Stark. Meanwhile, the real Tony, now trapped in Doom's body, is left unconscious and erased from history. From there, their lives spiral in opposite directions. Doom, in Stark's body, quickly rises to power, taking control of Stark Industries, leveraging its wealth and enhancing it with his Latverian blend of technology and magic. He builds weapons, manipulates politics, and eliminates anyone who questions his rise. And Tony, in Doom's body, wakes up in Latveria, broke, nameless, and forgotten. But Stark is still Stark. He rebuilds from nothing, studies endlessly, earns degrees under the name Victor Von Doom, and slowly reconstructs his identity, not as Iron Man, but as a benevolent Doom. So years pass. Doom, hungry for more power, sees Stark developing a revolutionary arc reactor, a potential game changer for clean energy. Fearing competition, Doom dons an advanced Iron Man-style battle armor and launches a full-scale assault on Stark's facility to destroy the reactor. But Stark is ready. Wearing a sleek rescue suit based on Latverian tech, he confronts Doom head-on. The battle is intense, Doom's armor is offensive and destructive, while Stark's is defensive and protective. But Stark outsmarts Doom by exploiting a key feature. The suit is wired to Doom's brainwaves. Stark hacks the signal, overloads the system, and blows Doom's armor apart. In the aftermath, Doom, in Stark's body, pleads for his life, offering to reverse the mind swap and give Tony back his legacy. But Tony refuses. He rejects the identity of Tony Stark, now stained by greed, war, and manipulation, and chooses to remain as Victor Von Doom, a symbol of peace and purpose in this world. The final irony, the world believes Doom is the villain, and Stark is the hero. But in this reality, the names have switched, and so have their meanings. Iron Man becomes Doctor Doom, and becomes the hero Doom could never be. Infamous Iron Man. Victor Von Doom, one of Marvel's greatest villains, decides to walk the path of redemption, not as Doom but as Iron Man. So in Infamous Iron Man 2016, written by Brian Michael Bendis, we witness one of the boldest reinventions of any Marvel character. Doctor Doom stepping into the role of Tony Stark after Stark's apparent death, as a genuine attempt to become a hero. Following the multiverse-shattering events of Secret Wars 2015, where Doom briefly wielded godlike power as the architect of Battleworld, he experiences a moment of clarity. He sees firsthand the consequences of his endless thirst for control and power. Stripped of his scars and cosmic power, he resolves to do something no one expects. With Tony presumed dead after the events of Civil War II, the world is left vulnerable. Doom steps into the vacuum not with arrogance but with a surprising sense of purpose. He creates a new suit of armor, combining advanced Stark technology with his own Latverian genius. He doesn't take the title Iron Man lightly. In fact, he fully embraces it, calling himself Infamous Iron Man, and fully aware that the world will never trust him. He begins hunting down villains like Matt Thinker and Diablo, and he operates in the shadows, and his mere presence is enough to strike fear into criminals and heroes alike. Yet the world refuses to accept him. The superhero community is deeply suspicious. Old foes like Ben Grimm aka The Thing and S.H.I.E.L.D. relentlessly pursue him, believing that this is just another Doom manipulation. But beneath the armor we see a Victor Von Doom who is genuinely struggling with the weight of his past. He even visits Tony Stark's AI, which serves as his occasional conscience, providing sharp commentary on Victor's choices. And what's brilliant about Infamous Iron Man is that it never lets you forget who Doom is, even as it forces you to wonder if redemption is truly possible for him. Doom questions himself constantly, haunted by visions of his mother and his failures, but he also shows moments of real heroism, saving civilians, sparing enemies, and even risking his life to do the right thing. Victor's journey as Iron Man isn't about pretending to be Tony Stark. It's about proving he can be more than Doctor Doom. He embraces the legacy of Iron Man while trying to atone for his sins, carrying the burden of both his dark past and his hopes for a better future. Kraven the Hunter becomes Spider-Man. One of the darkest and most psychologically twisted identity swaps in Marvel history occurs in the iconic storyline Kraven's Last Hunt. In it, Kraven the Hunter doesn't just try to defeat Spider-Man, he tries to become him. At this point in his life, Kraven, obsessed with proving his superiority, had grown older, bitter, and consumed by his failures. He had fought Spider-Man many times but never felt like he truly won. To him, Peter Parker represented something primal, the ultimate prey, an agile, noble beast that Kraven could never conquer. So he hatches a final plan, not to destroy Spider-Man physically, but spiritually and symbolically. Kraven ambushes Peter, drugs him, and buries him alive, believing that, in order to truly prove his dominance, he must not just kill the spider, he must become him. Donning a black Spider-Man suit, Kraven patrols the streets of New York as Spider-Man, but his version of justice is brutal, ruthless, and violent. He punishes criminals, striking fear into the hearts of everyone he encounters, and to the public, Spider-Man seems darker and more savage than ever before. But they have no idea it's not Peter under the mask. In his own twisted logic, Kraven believes he's honoring Spider-Man by embodying him, proving that he can be even better than the original. But he lacks Peter's compassion, restraint, and empathy. For Kraven, this is about proving himself once and for all. And to complete the hunt, Kraven captures Vermin, a savage, sewer-dwelling villain that even Spider-Man has struggled with. Kraven defeats Vermin single-handedly, something Spider-Man couldn't do without help, and considers it the final proof of his superiority. In his eyes, the hunt is over, and the spider is conquered. But then, Spider-Man claws his way out of the grave. He confronts Kraven, ready for revenge, but Kraven doesn't fight. He's calm, even at peace. He's already won in his mind. He lets Peter take Vermin away, claiming that Spider-Man has returned because he allowed it. And in one of the most haunting moments in Marvel Comics, Kraven takes his own life, believing his final hunt is complete and that he's finally at peace. Dr. Octopus becomes Spider-Man. Few identity swaps in Marvel history are as bold or controversial as the time when Dr. Otto Octavius became Spider-Man. This happened in the shocking finale of Amazing Spider-Man, issues 698 to 700 in 2012, and launched the now iconic Superior Spider-Man series. But this wasn't just a name change or a costume tweak, it was a full mind swap, and it completely upended everything readers thought they knew about Spider-Man. Here's how it happened. Otto Octavius, dying from a degenerative disease, manages to swap minds with Peter Parker, using advanced tech. Peter wakes up trapped in Otto's failing body, while Otto now lives inside Peter's younger, healthier one, with all of Peter's powers and memories. Just before dying, Peter forces Otto to relive his memories and feel the weight of his responsibility, hoping to guilt him into doing the right thing. And it works. Otto, moved by the sacrifices Peter made and the pain he endured, vows to carry on the mantle, but in his own way. He wants to be a better Spider-Man, a superior Spider-Man, and thus begins one of the most fascinating arcs in Spider-Man lore. Otto's visions of Spider-Man is more aggressive, calculated, and well, ruthless. He upgrades Peter's tech, builds an army of Spider-Bots to patrol New York, and applies his genius-level intellect and villainous pragmatism to crime fighting. He even earns a PhD, starts his own company, and finds ways to outsmart enemies that Peter struggled with for years. But his arrogance and authoritarian tendencies soon clash with what it really means to be Spider-Man. He nearly kills criminals, mind controls villains, and alienates allies, including Mary Jane and the Avengers. And while he achieves results, he starts to lose the heart and compassion that made Peter more than just a superhero. So despite all his achievements, Otto comes to realize that he cannot live up to Peter's legacy. And in the final arc of Superior Spider-Man, Otto is forced to face the Green Goblin, who returns to destroy everything Peter built. Outmatched and overwhelmed, Otto admits that Peter Parker is the true Spider-Man, and in a final act of humility, he erases his own consciousness and gives control of the body back to Peter. So Otto didn't become a hero overnight. He tried to be one, failed in his own way, and ultimately chose to do the right thing by surrendering the power he stole. One of the wildest and most stylish identity swaps in recent Marvel history comes during the Fall of X era, when Nightcrawler takes on the mantle of the Uncanny Spider-Man. During Fall of X, the mutant nation of Krakoa collapses, and mutants worldwide become targets once again. Orchis, a human supremacist organization, launches coordinated attacks. For many mutants, it's a time of fear and exile. But for Nightcrawler, rather than hide in the shadows, Kurt embraces a new identity to fight back. That's when he becomes the Uncanny Spider-Man, wearing a modified Spider-Man suit with his signature swashbuckler flair, complete with a blue and red color scheme tailored to him. Kurt swings into action in Uncanny Spider-Man 1 in 2023. His new persona serves several purposes. It allows him to operate in public spaces without immediately being identified as a mutant, and it lets him play with his natural agility, acrobatics, and teleportation in a new crowd-pleasing way. And of course, his powers aren't spider-based, and he even keeps his signature tail, wrapping it into his new combat moves, giving him an almost otherworldly presence as Spider-Man. But beneath the mask, this transformation is about more than tactics. Nightcrawler has always been a man of hope and resilience. Despite being demon-like in appearance, he has consistently been one of the kindest, most optimistic X-Men, believing in unity and compassion even when the world rejected him. So becoming the Uncanny Spider-Man allows him to symbolize those values, while masking his mutant identity from a public growing more hostile every day. And he even remarks that being Spider-Man is fun, something Kurt hasn't had much of in a world falling apart. But under the humor and swashbuckling charm, there's a deep pain. He's carrying the weight of Krakoa's fall, the loss of friends, and the constant pressure of being a mutant in hiding. And through this disguise, Kurt finds a way to keep fighting, without losing himself to despair. Shadowcat becomes Star-Lord. Peter Quill, aka Star-Lord, is a space outlaw, helmet-wearing rogue, and leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy. But in a surprising twist for Marvel Comics, the role of Star-Lord was once taken up by none other than Kitty Pryde, the longtime X-Men mainstay and mutant. This unexpected transition happened during the Black Vortex crossover event in 2015, and its aftermath. At the time, Peter Quill and Kitty Pryde were romantically involved, and Peter had taken on more official responsibilities in the newly restructured Galactic Council, leaving his Star-Lord duties behind. And with Peter stepping into politics, he needed someone he trusted to watch his back and to protect the galaxy. Enter Kitty Pryde. Kitty had already proven herself as one of the X-Men's most capable and level-headed leaders, but this was a whole new arena. She donned Peter's signature Star-Lord helmet and gear and officially became the new Star-Lord, complete with her own title in Star-Lord and Kitty Pryde and her ongoing presence in the Guardians of the Galaxy books around that time. As Star-Lord, Kitty retained her core powers, phasing through solid matter, disrupting electronics, and making herself nearly untouchable in combat. But she also adapted the spacefaring lifestyle quickly, showing off her leadership skills, quick wit, and her willingness to make hard calls in high-stakes scenarios. And her time wielding the cosmic-enhancing Black Vortex had briefly given her godlike power, which she later relinquished, but it left her changed, more confident, and capable of operating on a galactic level. Kitty's version of Star-Lord wasn't about being a charming space pirate, it was about being the moral compass in a lawless corner of the universe. She balanced her mutant loyalty with the larger responsibilities of a guardian. She fought alongside Rocket, Groot, and Drax, she faced cosmic threats, and she showed the universe that a mutant from Earth could be just as much of a cosmic hero as anyone else. And of course, eventually Peter Quill returned to the role of Star-Lord, and Kitty stepped down, resuming her life with the X-Men. Miss Marvel becomes Captain Marvel. For decades, Carol Danvers was one of Marvel's most powerful heroes, operating under a borrowed legacy. But in Avengers Spider-Man 9, she first appeared as Captain Marvel, before getting her own series Captain Marvel in 2012. Carol Danvers' history is complex, and her transformation from Miss Marvel to Captain Marvel is even more complex. Carol began her career as an Air Force pilot and intelligence officer, and later became Miss Marvel after being caught in a Kree explosion involving the original Captain Marvel, Mar-Vell. This event infused her with Kree DNA, granting her powers of flight, super strength, energy projection, and durability. For years, she fought under the name Miss Marvel, a name that kept her in orbit of male legacy heroes, especially Mar-Vell, who died in the original death of Captain Marvel graphic novel in 1982. And despite being one of the most powerful heroes on the planet, Carol often found herself sidelined or defined by others, whether it was the X-Men, the Avengers, or comparisons to male counterparts. But come 2012, Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, encouraged her to take on the Captain Marvel title. It wasn't just approval, it was recognition. Carol had long outgrown the Miss Marvel mantle. She had earned the right to stand on her own, to lead, and to represent the best of what superheroes could be. Her new costume, designed by Jamie McKelvey, was a sleek, military-inspired suit with a bold red, blue, and gold color scheme and a starburst emblem across her chest. It embodied both Air Force discipline and her cosmic power. And with this new identity, Carol's stories expanded to match her potential. She became a cosmic protector, leading intergalactic missions, defending Earth from alien invasions, and eventually becoming the leader of Alpha Flight, Earth's space defense initiative. She battled with addiction and memory loss, and survived identity theft, literally during the Rogue incident. And she's not flawless. She makes hard decisions, and sometimes controversial ones. Civil War II, she still leads because she must, because others look to her when things go wrong, and because she never backs down from doing what's right, even when it costs her. and her ascension also opened the door for Kamala Khan to step into the Miss Marvel role. Elektra becomes Daredevil. Known for years as an assassin, mercenary, and occasional anti-hero, Elektra's rise to take on Matt Murdock's identity in Daredevil 2020 was not only a thrilling twist, but a deeply meaningful transformation, both for her character and the legacy of the Devil of Hell's Kitchen. At the time, Matt Murdock was facing the consequences of accidentally killing a man while fighting crime. True to his moral code, Matt chose to accept responsibility, serving a prison sentence rather than evade justice. But Matt knew that while he was behind bars, Hell's Kitchen couldn't be left undefended, and that's where Elektra stepped in. Elektra wasn't forced into the role. She was once a lethal assassin trained by the hand, and had long walked the thin line between villain and hero, driven by her own codes of honor, but never truly bound by morality the way Matt was. Yet when the streets of Hell's Kitchen needed protection, she saw an opportunity to not only fill the void left by Daredevil, but to redeem herself. But make no mistake, Elektra's Daredevil is her own version of the mantle. While she honors Matt's legacy, she refuses to be a mere imitation. She embraces the costume and brings her own ruthless fighting style, blending brutal assassin techniques with Daredevil's acrobatic brawling. And perhaps most interestingly, she makes a vow to Matt. While wearing the Daredevil costume, she will not kill. And what makes Elektra's turn as Daredevil so compelling is that it flips her entire character arc on its head. She goes from a lone assassin driven by vengeance and personal codes to a symbol of hope and protection for a community. She fights not for herself, but for the people of Hell's Kitchen, a place that once represented everything chaotic in her life, and now a place she fights to preserve. So she's not just wearing the costume, she's redefining it. And this transformation proves that the Devil of Hell's Kitchen can come in many forms, and sometimes it takes a former assassin to protect a city full of sinners. Loki becomes Sorcerer Supreme. This wild development happened in Doctor Strange 2015, 381. This story is not a what-if, not an alternate universe, it's mainline continuity. At the time, Stephen Strange had grown weakened and weary, having faced countless mystical threats that left his connection to the magical arts fractured. Loki, never one to miss an opportunity, saw the vulnerability and petitioned to Vishanti, the ancient deities who empowered the Sorcerer Supreme. And surprisingly, they agreed, and with a flash of green magic and trickery, Loki becomes the Sorcerer Supreme. But here's the thing about Loki. He's not a simple villain. When he claims this title, he actually tries to use it for good. At least his version of it. And just because Loki wears the cloak and wields the Eye of Agamotto, doesn't mean he's free from his own nature. He's still a trickster god, and his schemes, half-truths and manipulations pile up fast. It turns out that Loki didn't just stumble into this role, he orchestrated a plan to steal the mantle, seeing it as the ultimate power play in this ongoing journey of self-justification and personal reinvention. And Stephen Strange, now powerless, isn't about to let this stand. He becomes something of an underground magic rebel, working from the shadows to undermine Loki's rule. And their rivalry turns from physical confrontations to a cerebral chess game of spells, tricks, and mystique politics. Strange knows Loki's heart is too tainted for the role, no matter how good his intentions might appear. And the story reaches a wild climax when Strange reveals that he allowed Loki to take the mantle, knowing it would set events into motion that ultimately lead to a greater good. And Loki ultimately steps away from the title. So for a brief, strange moment, Loki wasn't just the god of mischief, he was the Sorcerer Supreme, standing at the crossroads of chaos and responsibility. Steve Rogers becomes Nomad. One of the most defining moments in Steve Rogers' history came when he chose to shed the mantle of Captain America and become something radically different. Nomad, the man without a country. This wasn't about power or a new identity for the sake of it. It was a story about ideals versus institutions. The transformation happened in Captain America 180 in 1974. The United States had just gone through the trauma of Watergate, and trust in the government was at an all-time low. In the Marvel Universe, Steve Rogers discovered that a secret cabal known as the Secret Empire had infiltrated the highest levels of the US government. Even worse, the leader of the Secret Empire was revealed to be a high-ranking government official, heavily implied to be the president himself. For Steve Rogers, this revelation was devastating, and as Captain America, he stood for the ideals of his country: truth, justice, and liberty. But seeing corruption at the very heart of the system forced him to confront a painful truth. The flag and the institution he fought for were not the same thing as the ideals he believed in. So Steve abandoned the identity of Captain America, believing that he could no longer represent a nation that had betrayed its own values. But Steve is, at his core, a man of action and principle. He didn't retire, he reinvented himself and became Nomad. As Nomad, Steve adapted a completely new look, a darker, more stripped-down costume with a flowing cape and a starless chest, symbolizing his separation from the flag. He no longer fought as a patriotic symbol, but as a free agent of justice, traveling the country and continuing to fight for the people, even if he wasn't doing it under the stars and stripes. And this period in Steve's life is crucial because it shows the depth of his moral compass. He wasn't blindly loyal to authority, he was loyal to principles. Even without the shield, the costume, or the title, Steve continued to be a hero, and his sense of justice was never about recognition or symbols. It was about doing what's right, even when the world is wrong. And eventually Steve reclaimed the mantle of Captain America after realizing that he could still embody the ideals of the nation, even if its institutions faltered. And even long after Steve returned to being Cap, the name Nomad lived on, passed to others like Jack Monroe and Ricky Barnes, serving as a reminder that heroism isn't about nationality, it's about courage, conviction, and doing what's right, even when you stand alone. Psylocke becomes Captain Britain. Betsy Braddock, also known as Psylocke, has worn many titles throughout her complex Marvel history: Telepath, Assassin, X-Men, and in Excalibur in 2019, Betsy steps into the role that once belonged to her brother, Brian Braddock, and becomes not just a protector of Britain, but a champion of the multiverse and Otherworld itself. To understand the significance of this, we have to go back to her origins. Betsy is Brian Braddock's twin sister, originally a telepath and skilled martial artist who for years operated as Psylocke. Her journey was already complicated. She spent years trapped in the body of the Japanese assassin, Quanon, making her a warrior who constantly struggled with questions of identity and belonging. But despite this, she became one of the deadliest members of the X-Men, wielding her psychic blade with lethal precision. And during the dawn of X era, the mutant nation of Krakoa forms, and with it comes a resurgence of mutant influence across dimensions. The mystical realm of Otherworld, which serves as a nexus of realities, finds itself under threat. Traditionally, the protector of this realm is Captain Britain, a mantle that comes with the Amulet of Right, a mystical artifact of immense power. But when the original Captain Britain becomes corrupted by Morgan Le Fay, the amulet chooses Betsy instead. In that moment, she doesn't just inherit the title, she claims it. As Captain Britain, Betsy blends her formidable psychic abilities with the enchanted power of the amulet and forges her own path. She navigates the tensions between Britain and Krakoa, balancing her duties as a mutant ambassador with her role as a protector of British Isles. She faces distrust from the British government, skepticism from her fellow mutants, and even the mystical trials of Otherworld. But through it all, she remains resilient, carving out her place as a symbol of strength, unity, and hope. But most importantly, Betsy's Captain Britain isn't about leaving Psylocke behind. It's about embracing her full self. She carries both identities with her, not as burdens, but as sources of power. Hawkeye becomes Goliath. When you think of Clint Barton, the first thing that comes to mind is probably Hawkeye, the bow-wielding Avenger with perfect aim. But there was a time when Clint hung up his quiver and arrows and stepped into the shoes of an entirely different kind of hero, Goliath. Clint's time as Goliath happened during the Silver Age of Marvel, specifically in Avengers 63 in 1969. At that time, Hank Pym, the original Goliath, and also Ant-Man, Giant Man, and Yellow Jacket depending on the day, had temporarily stepped away from superhero work. His size-changing Pym particles were left behind, and Clint, never one to back away from a challenge, volunteered to use them. Clint was tired of being seen as just the guy with the bow, among a team of super soldiers, gods, and armored geniuses. He wanted to contribute on a bigger scale, literally. By using Hank Pym's serum, Clint became the new Goliath, able to grow to heights of 25 feet or more, with all the superhuman strength and durability that came with it. As Goliath, Clint took on a more traditional superhero look. He fought enemies like the Red Guardian, Whirlwind, and Egghead's Masters of Evil, using his towering form to dominate the battlefield. But while he had the size and strength, his heart remained pure Hawkeye, defiant, reckless, and always willing to mount off mid-fight. And this transformation wasn't permanent, of course. Clint would eventually go back to being Hawkeye, realizing that while the Goliath's powers were impressive, they didn't define him. He was never meant to be a tank. He was a strategist, a rebel, and most importantly, a long-range fighter. Goliath was an experiment, a chance to stretch himself. But it only reinforced how important it was for him to stay true to his roots. Still, Clint's time as Goliath was fascinating. Every hero tries to grow, sometimes literally, to prove their worth. And for a time, Hawkeye wasn't just the guy with the bow, he was the biggest guy in the room. Falcon becomes Captain America. In the wake of Steve Rogers aging and stepping down from the role, Sam Wilson, formerly known as the Falcon, took up the mantle of Captain America. And this transition happens in Captain America Volume 7, Issue 25, and it's one of the most significant and timely evolutions of the Captain America legacy. Sam Wilson had long been one of Steve Rogers' most trusted allies, from their days in the Avengers to battles across dimensions. Sam had proven himself again and again, not only as a skilled aerial combatant and tactician, but as a man of unshakable moral conviction. And when Steve Rogers was stripped of the super soldier serum and aged into his senior years, he personally chose Sam to be his successor. Not Bucky, not another super soldier, a man without powers, just wings, a sharp mind, and a heart built for justice. So when Sam dons the red, white, and blue, he does it his way. He retains his Falcon wings, giving this new Captain America a powerful aerial presence never seen before. He fights with a vibranium shield and enhanced tech. But most importantly, he brings his lived experience into the role. A black man raised in Harlem, someone who understands injustice not just on the battlefield, but on the streets. And this Captain America doesn't shy away from political issues. He doesn't just fight Hydra or supervillains, he speaks out on racial inequality, police brutality, and corruption. And he often finds himself at odds with every country he's trying to protect, sparking controversy within both the Marvel Universe and the real-world fanbase. During his tenure, Sam takes on classic enemies like Baron Zemo, Sin, the daughter of Red Skull, and the Serpent Society, while also dealing with the deeper complexities of being a symbol in a divided nation. He faces resistance from the government, the media, and even fans within the Marvel Universe who feel he's not their Cap. But Sam understands that being Captain America isn't about being universally loved. It's about standing up for what's right, even when you're alone. Eventually, Steve Rogers returns and reclaims the shield for the time, but Sam Wilson's impact remains permanent. In the MCU, this legacy was honored with Sam Wilson, played by Anthony Mackie, officially becoming Captain America in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and continuing in Captain America Brave New World, and again reprising his role in Avengers Doomsday next year. Winter Soldier becomes Captain America. Of all the Marvel heroes who have taken up another's mantle, Bucky Barnes becoming Captain America is one of the most popular, emotional, and thematically rich stories in Marvel history. The seeds of this moment were planted long ago. Bucky Barnes was once Steve Rogers' loyal sidekick during World War II, but fate took a dark turn when Bucky was presumed dead after a bomb exploded during a mission. Bucky did survive, but his broken body was recovered by Soviet operatives, and his mind was wiped and reprogrammed, turning him into the Winter Soldier. Years later, Steve Rogers, now in the modern age, discovered that his lost friend was alive, but under the control of his enemies. Steve fought to free Bucky from his programming, using their shared history and deep bond to help him remember who he truly was. Steve succeeded, and Bucky began the long, painful road to redemption, haunted by the atrocities he committed as the Winter Soldier. Then came the moment that changed everything. In the Death of Captain America storyline, Steve Rogers was assassinated following the events of Civil War. The Marvel Universe was left reeling, and America was without its symbol of hope. Tony Stark, recognizing the weight of Steve's legacy and knowing that the world needed Captain America now more than ever, offered the shield to Bucky Barnes. At first, Bucky refused. He didn't feel worthy, but eventually he accepted, not because he wanted to replace Steve, but because he wanted to honor him and prove to himself and the world that he could be something more than his past. As Captain America, Bucky brought a grittier, more tactical edge to the role. Unlike Steve's shining idealism, Bucky fought like a man who knew the ugliness of war up close. He combined the symbol of the shield with the pragmatism of the Winter Soldier, often carrying a firearm alongside the iconic shield. His fighting style was brutal and efficient, yet deeply protective, redefining what it meant to be Captain America. And Bucky's time as Cap wasn't just about honoring Steve's legacy, it was about atonement. He faced distrust from the public and skepticism from fellow heroes. He battled old enemies and his own inner demons, but through it all, he earned his place, proving that even someone with blood on their hands could rise to become a symbol of hope. Reed Richards becomes Doctor Doom. In the Earth X universe, Earth 9997, Marvel explored a darker, grimmer future where nearly every human on Earth has developed superpowers, and the cost of power weighs heavily on the heroes we thought we knew. Among the most shocking twists in this alternate reality is the fate of Reed Richards, the leader of the Fantastic Four, who does the unthinkable. He becomes Doctor Doom. In this dystopian world, Reed lives in crippling regret over the tragedies that have befallen humanity and the losses suffered by his own family. The Fantastic Four are no more, and Reed, a man defined by his relentless desire to solve problems, failed to save those closest to him, and that failure consumes him. Racked with guilt and blaming himself for everything that went wrong, Reed retreats into isolation in Castle Doom, Victor Von Doom's old stronghold in Latveria. But Reed doesn't just hide away, he takes it a step further. He assumes the identity of Dr. Doom himself, donning Victor's iconic armor and mask and becoming the very man he spent his life opposing. But here's the brilliance of this twist. Reed does not become Doom in the traditional villainous sense. He becomes Doom as an act of penance. In his mind, he deserves the mask, the scars, the legacy of his greatest enemy, because he sees himself as the ultimate failure. By becoming Doom, Reed carries the weight of all his sins, living as a self-imposed outcast while trying desperately to redeem his past mistakes. And despite the mask Reed's score as a hero never fully disappears, as Doom, he continues to work for the good of the planet in his own harsh, utilitarian way. He engineers solutions to the cosmic level problems Earth faces in this era, grappling with threats like the Celestials. And in this way, Reed Richards becoming Dr. Doom is not about power. It's about punishment and responsibility. It's about a man who cannot forgive himself, even as he tries to save the world. He wears the mask not to hide from others, but to face himself every single day. The Dark Avengers. A team that looks like Earth's mightiest heroes on the surface, but hides villains underneath. Formed in the aftermath of Secret Invasion in 2008, this team was created by Norman Osborn, yes, the Green Goblin himself, during a time when the world was desperate for order and security. With the heroes discredited and scattered, Osborn seized power, became the head of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s replacement, Hammer, and put together his own Avengers team, except they weren't Avengers at all. Debuting in Dark Avengers 1 in 2009, this version of the Avengers operated during the Dark Reign era. Norman's idea was simple: take supervillains, criminals, and anti-heroes and dress them up as the icons the public trusted. And here's the terrifying roster and who was really behind the masks. Norman Osborn as the Iron Patriot. Wearing armor painted like a fusion of Iron Man and Captain America, Norman positioned himself as the patriotic face of heroism while still being dangerously unstable behind the scenes. He wanted power, control, and influence, and now he had it. McGargan, formerly Scorpion, as Spider-Man, but not the friendly neighborhood kind. This Spider-Man was actually the current host of the Venom symbiote and barely held back from devouring enemies. Bullseye as Hawkeye, this one is self-explanatory. Moonstone as Miss Marvel, a manipulative psychiatrist turned supervillain, posed as Carol Danvers. Daken as Wolverine, Logan Twisted's son who inherited his father's claws but not his moral code. Novar, aka Marvel Boy, as Captain Marvel, one of the few members with potential for actual heroism. Novar was a young Kree warrior trying to find purpose but ended up on a team full of monsters. Ares, the god of war. Unlike the others, Ares was not pretending to be anyone else, he was just a warrior, drawn to battle. Though not evil, his loyalty to Osborn was based on the promise of war and victory. And Sentry, the most powerful member with the strength of a god and the mind of a shattered man. Sentry's split personality, the Void, was barely contained, making him both a terrifying asset and a nuclear threat waiting to go off. To the world, the Dark Avengers looked like heroes saving the day, but in reality, they were a ticking bomb, held together by Osborn's lies, blackmail, and psychological manipulation. And over time, Norman's ego and mental instability deepened, and the team's internal chaos grew. And when Sentry fully gave in to the Void, it culminated in the catastrophic events of Siege, when Osborn led an illegal assault on Asgard. The result? Total collapse. Osborn was exposed, the Dark Avengers disbanded, and Steve Rogers returned to rebuild the real Avengers. Cosmic Ghost Rider. He is one of the most terrifying and overpowered versions of Frank Castle. He is an insane fusion of the Punisher, Ghost Rider, and a Herald of Galactus. This variant takes the already brutal and relentless nature of Frank Castle and applies it with supernatural and cosmic power. First introduced in Thanos 13 in 2017, his origin is set in a dystopian future where Thanos has conquered all life. In this timeline, the Punisher, who has already spent a lifetime waging war on criminals, finds himself alone after Earth's heroes are wiped out. Without crime to fight, Frank is left with nothing but rage and regret, and when he dies, his soul is sent to hell. However, instead of finding peace, Frank makes a deal with Mephisto, becoming the new Ghost Rider, the spirit of vengeance, in exchange for the chance to keep punishing the wicked. But by the time Frank is reborn as Ghost Rider, he realizes it's too late. Earth is already dead, and Thanos has won. Left with no one to punish, he wanders alone for centuries, going mad in the process. Eventually, Galactus arrives, seeking help against Thanos, and Frank, desperate for purpose, agrees to serve him, gaining the power cosmic and and becoming his new herald. Now wielding the flames of hell and the cosmic might of a herald, he transforms into something completely new, an unstoppable force with the power of God and the mind of a lunatic. And in the Thanos Wins storyline, Cosmic Ghost Rider serves King Thanos as his loyal companion and executioner, aiding the Mad Titan in conquering and destroying all opposition across the universe. Despite his overwhelming power, Frank Castle becomes somewhat resigned to this dark role, accepting it as part of his eternal punishment. As of his abilities, they include Hellfire Manipulation. As Ghost Rider, he can summon and control Hellfire, which burns the souls of his enemies. Power Cosmic, thanks to Galactus, he has reality wrapping abilities, near invincibility, and cosmic level energy attacks, superhuman strength and durability, and his Ghost Rider chains are now infused with cosmic energy, and his stare, which forces victims to relive their worst sins, is even more devastating due to his cosmic enhancement. And one of the most insane aspects of Cosmic Ghost Rider's story comes after Galactus falls, and he is once again left alone. When Thanos finally kills him, he is sent to Valhalla, where Odin offers him a chance at redemption. Instead of choosing peace, Frank asks to be sent back in time, to kill baby Thanos, before he becomes a monster. However, once he arrives, he can't bring himself to kill the child, and instead decides to raise him differently, hoping to prevent him from becoming the Mad Titan. And this leads to one of the wildest and most chaotic alternate Marvel stories ever, as Cosmic Ghost Rider tries and fails to raise Thanos into a better person, only to realize some monsters are inevitable. Cosmic Ghost Rider still follows Frank Castle's core belief, punishing the guilty. But as he learns, ultimate power doesn't mean ultimate justice. His story is a wild mix of darkness, humor, and literally cosmic insanity, making him one of the most unforgettable, evilish versions of the Punisher in Marvel history.